Alright guys, I have watched all of the videos on the new GR86 and BRZ on YouTube, and I gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed that none of the reviews are really focusing on the things that I think are actually different between the two generations. So everyone's talking about the power. Okay, obviously, yes, the power on the new generation is vastly improved, especially the torque tip at the lower RPMs. But beyond that, it isn't all good in the newer cars. So I want to talk to you about that in this video. I've owned a 2013 Scion FR-S for 9 years. I actually have that in the garage right now. We'll be swapping the cars later in this video. And I got this on July 4th weekend from Utah, and I drove it back here down to Vegas. So here are my impressions after owning this for the last couple of weeks. I've put on around 600 miles since then, and so still very, early impressions. But I'm going to tell you what everyone else is not. So let's get started. First of all, things that I do not like about the new GR86. Number one is the steering feel. This steering feel is a substantial downgrade from the previous generation, and I mean, they're all like this. I've driven another GR86 that's the premium trim. This is the base trim. I've also driven a BRZ Limited, and they all have the same steering issue where it's good, but it's definitely not as good as the prior generation. So that's the first thing I definitely don't like, and I don't think enough people are actually mentioning that. Now keep in mind, we all have biases, we all have different preferences. As a driving enthusiast, as a car enthusiast, my preferences are definitely leaning more towards, I like lightweight cars, I like beautiful steering, I like hydraulic steering in Lotuses as an example. And the engine, I care about an engine, just like any car enthusiast, but a lackluster engine doesn't bother me as much as it seems to bother many other car enthusiasts. So that's the first thing I don't like. Other things I don't like, the actual space in the interior has never been great, but it's severely limited now. So the space here is much less than it was before, and I'll show you in the other car what that one looks like. In the other one, I was able to have these things on the side and then have space in the front for wallet and various other things that I needed. And I was full already with my various little knickknacks. There was a shelf over here that I could put like a cleaning cloth for my glasses or small little things. They've gotten rid of that, so there's no space there anymore. Glove box seems roughly the same size, possibly a little bit smaller. I'm not quite sure. The one thing I do really like about the interior is that these water bottle holders on the side are much deeper. They have this little indentation right here. You can see that. Same thing right here. So if you have one of those big bottles, which I do, then it can actually fit here, whereas in the other generation, I could never fit it in the door. So definitely like that. I mean, obviously the fit and finish of the interior is vastly improved. The quality of just like the soft touch materials. This is the base, so I don't have Alcantara. I'm just but a peasant, but it still feels a lot more refined in here. And things like this, the climate control, I have a 2013 base level FR-S, so didn't even have climate control. So having climate control is a big step up. I really do like that. Having CarPlay is definitely a nice addition. I liked the trim piece over here on the side. It was easier to mount my little Ghetto Fab Apple, what is this called? MagSafe charger on this other charger phone mount thing with double-sided tape. But it's working right now. We'll see if it stays. Overall, like it's a mixed bag. There's things I like, things I don't like, right? So steering is a definite downgrade. The throttle response is actually not as immediate as the first gen. The first gen, it's a little bit easier. Maybe I'm just used to it. I'm definitely just used to it. But I think it may also be easier to modulate that first gen throttle compared to this gen based on my driving experience so far. I need to definitely give it more throttle when I'm starting from a stop, and it's not as easy for me to be as consistent and smooth, for each start. The clutch pedal, I removed the clutch helper spring on the 2013 FR-S, and that gave it a better feel. I haven't done it yet here, so I wonder if I remove this clutch helper spring, if I'll get better feel, because right now I don't have as much feel as I would like in terms of the engagement point. The engine, obviously, much better. We all know that. I unplugged the sound tube on the side because I didn't like the fake engine noise. But it's a mixed bag, guys. The transmission obviously is a lot better. I like the shifting is notchier. Cross shifting between gears is definitely more confidence inspiring, and you're going to make fewer mistakes. Whether you like analog or digital, I personally prefer the analog, so I wish I had that, but not a big deal. Having the oil temp is a huge thumbs up, huge. So especially if you track the vehicle on the first gen, you can do that in the aftermarket and get some gauges and whatever, but it's a whole pain in the ass, right? But in this car, it comes with it and you can have it right there, which is super fantastic. Now, coming outside, the styling, I'm convinced it is way better than the old gen in every way, but a lot of people hate the rear. I think those people are being silly. The actual trunk, the opening is shorter, so that can be a problem depending on what you're trying to fit, but it's not a big deal to me. I don't haul that many big things, and I no longer carry my bike inside. You can still fold the seats down, of course. I now use a hitch mount for my bike rack. You know, this little trim piece here, on the 2013 Scion FR-S, it did not come stock, so I had to add it. I actually bought one from the Subaru part shop, and I added it, but nice that they come with this. And overall, I'm definitely happy with the purchase. I'm happy that I have this car, mostly because the first generation was getting long in the tooth. I've had that car, again, for over 9 years now, which is such a long time for especially for a car enthusiast. But one thing I will say is, guys, I'm old AF. I got that grandpa energy, and that's another thing you have to consider when you're buying a car like this. This is going to be my dedicated track day toy, and as such, I don't care as much about the fit and finish and the niceties, right? How refined it is. That's a big reason why I went with the base, or I was willing to compromise and get a base rather than continuing to wait for a premium trim, because this is going to be my track day beater. The road noise, according to my Apple Watch, I get that decibel meter right here, or the SPL meter, whatever it's called. That is, I believe, like 6 or 7 decibels lower. It's like 71, 72 on the highway, whereas in the old generation, it was closer to 80. So it's definitely significantly quieter in the interior. But, you know, you can't hear the engine as well. It's not as, the steering doesn't feel as raw. The clutch engagement and the throttle doesn't feel as raw. Oh yeah, by the way, I also got the rubber, what are these called? Pedals, because this is the base trim. So if you can see, these are rubber, not metal, which actually gives you more friction, more grip. So when you're rotating for a heel toe like that, it's a slightly more challenging, something to get used to. If it continues to be a problem, I'll just replace it and get the metal pedals. But yeah, the first gen, it feels more raw. It feels a little bit more of that 90s sports car vibe. And if you like that, then this newer generation doesn't give you that. It gives you more of a polished, refined daily driver vehicle. So if you do want a new daily driver, and I think the GR86 is a fantastic vehicle, then it is going to be more polished. It is going to be more refined. It is going to be a lot more comfortable. And I think, you know, the other thing you need to think about is how does it involve you emotionally? And one thing that I loved about the first gen, because it was so low on power, it egged you on. It encouraged you to beat the shit out of it. And every single time I drove, even on these just Vegas, you know, suburban roads, I would get the tail out. And even though I have Michelin Pilot 4S tires, and they're, 245 all around, you can easily get the tail out at low speeds in second gear, not a big deal. And that car, because the power was so lacking on the low end because of that torque dip, it encouraged you to redline it a couple times every time you drove it. And this car, because I have that low end torque, it doesn't do that for me, which is fine, right? This is overall objectively a much better car, but I think most of the car press is telling you that this car is up here and the old generation was down here. I disagree with that. I think the new generation is here and the old generation is here. So is the new generation better? Yeah, in most ways. But it's not a complete 100% improvement all across the board. I've seen maybe one channel, I think Savage Geese mentioned that the steering isn't as good. Those are like the only guys that have mentioned that. This steering is substantially worse on the new gen versus the first gen. And as someone that does care a lot about steering, that kind of bums me out. Is it a deal breaker? No. Do I regret my purchase? Absolutely not. It's definitely a a welcome change because, you know, partially the power and partially the fit and finish, and because, guys, I'm getting old. So if I was in my early 20s, I would probably want something more raw. I like that 90s kind of sports car feel. And that first generation, it's not quite 90s in the rawness in the sports car, but it's much closer to that than this. So now, let's swap cars and get into the first generation. All right, and we are now in the 2013 Scion FR-S. I've had this car for 9 years, July of 2013. Two things right off the bat. Number one is the AC in this is much worse. You notice that in a place like Las Vegas. During the summer months, peak heat, over 100 degrees, this car will struggle to keep you cool. You will be sweating, you will not be comfortable. The new car, I've actually never had that problem. The newer AC is definitely better. The other thing is the turn signal stock. A lot of people prefer this old turn signal versus the new one. The new one has more of a BMW style where it's, you know, soft press and it comes back, it resets to neutral. And I have no problem with that. There are so many car reviewers who have said that they don't like that and that they messed it up and they can't understand it, they can't figure it out. I think that they're just being dramatic. That's silly. I literally have not had a single instance where I mistouched it or miscalibrated it. It was just totally fine. It's always worked as designed. Now the interior on this car is noticeably poor quality. Obviously, the cloth seats. I have cloth seats in both cars because, again, hashtag peasant status. I didn't get the Alcantara in the new one either. But the interior quality, the fit and finish, the way things look and feel just isn't nearly as nice. This was actually kind of cool though, because I had the sticky phone mount here, and then I could wire it right there for my, that way I had wireless audio, and I could just, bam, stick my phone there, charge it, and listen to music without issue. And it was also, the screen was pointing at me in case I needed a GPS. So I think for most people, having CarPlay is a huge win, but because of this system that I had in this car, CarPlay is nice, but it's not a total game changer because I already had my GPS pointing at me right there from my phone. The actual steering feel when you're driving it is, the steering feel is way heavier and it gives you more feedback. It's more precise and it doesn't have this kind of strange numbness and laziness right around center like the new generation does. The clutch, I did remove the clutch helper spring like 6 years ago. In hindsight, I should have removed it on the GR86 when making a comparison. I prefer this clutch. It is much heavier, it has a shorter throw, and I get a little bit more feedback. Once I remove the clutch helper spring on the new car, I'm sure I'll get a little bit more feedback, a little bit more feel, and I'll prefer that just fine. Shifter in this is definitely worse. Not as notchy, not as confidence inspiring when you select a gear compared to the new generation, and also going across gears requires a little bit more finesse from the driver. Overall, this older generation is a more raw driving experience. It's not as soft. If I downshift and I don't get it quite right, it's less forgiving. And I notice when I drive this, because the torque is so lackluster at, you know, around 35 to 4,500 or 5,000 RPM, somewhere around there, I find myself downshifting a lot more. Whereas with the newer generation, I can just give it some throttle and then boom, I can overtake the car I need to overtake. But here in this car, I find myself needing to downshift because if I don't, I'm like, wait, why is this car not going? Why are we not going anywhere? And I think if you're used to high power cars, that can be very frustrating. But if you're used to lower power cars, or you understand that it forces you to be more engaged, it's actually not that big of a deal at all. In fact, it's kind of fun. It forces you to shift more often. And the reason we drive stick shift is because we like shifting. We like being engaged in the driving experience. So I just find myself shifting more frequently in this car because of the suboptimal power band. Now the engine, it sounds even more like a garbage disposal in this first generation compared to the second generation. Especially around 5,000 to 6,000 RPM, it sounds legit exact like my garbage disposal, and it's not good. So you're gonna be missing the emotional aspect of a beautiful sounding engine in either car. I should also mention that the mods on this car are only catless headers, tune, CSG86 touring exhaust, what else did I do? Wheels, Apex Arc 8 wheels with Michelin Pilot 4S rubber, and brake pads, Ferodo DS2500s, and brake fluid, obviously. So the car is mostly stock-ish. I haven't changed the suspension or anything. This thing will still understeer at the limit quite a bit, and adding some camber to the front of both this generation and the new generation will alleviate that. So overall, the new generation is not as good as most people say it is. This old generation isn't as bad as most people say it is. When you look at the original reviews of this car when it first came out in 2012, people were gushing over it. So fun to drive, driving experience, the balance, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's amazing. I think Jeremy Clarkson said, "He who shall be last shall be sideways and smiling," when reviewing both the FR-S or GT86 and the BRZ. Because they understood the purpose of this car. And then, you know, over the years, people were like, hey, we want more power, we want more power. And then everyone got so fixated on this torque dip that the car became underrated. People thought that it was worse than it was because of this torque dip. Is it a downside? Sure. But again, if you're going for maximal miles per gallon, then it's not that big of a deal. And even at the racetrack, once you get up into the higher power band, it's not a big deal. It's about the driver mod, the driver's skill. So don't think that a car like this is going to limit you if you're trying to improve your driving technique. It's actually a phenomenal tool for that. And you'll be faster than a lot of cars on the racetrack that if you work on your driver skill, and you'll embarrass, you know, various Porsches, BMWs, Audis, and so on and so forth, Corvettes. I know this is going to be a controversial video because what I'm saying seems to be quite unpopular. But that's okay, guys. We're all entitled to our own opinions. All I ask is that you keep it civil in the comments. Much love, my friends. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in that next one.